For a live service Fire Emblem game that's on its 8th year, I think it's really impressive that it's even gotten this far. And naturally, for a game of this kind, it's not really surprising that a lot has changed over the course of 7+ years. But one thing that I feel like, at least on my end as of late, I haven't really gone into big discussion about or anything of the sort that's really in the scope of Heroes is just all the positive stuff around it. I think I've talked about it here or there about like, oh, this is cool and blah 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 and all sorts of whatever, right? I don't think I've really had a dedicated video on this channel where I just talk about the game and all its great aspects. And I don't necessarily want this to be a glazing video because, I mean, I'm definitely one of the bigger critics when it comes to this game, but I also want to give it a fair shake and say that for whatever bumps in the road that the game might have, for whatever bad game design choices or really mediocre additions to the game that they put in, there's still plenty of stuff that you could absolutely get out of it. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to criticize it every single time it does something stupid, because I'll be on the forefront of that. But even so, I can't say there haven't been good things about the game overall. I think one of my favorite parts of the game in general is just all the new character representation that we get. And granted, the game has definitely gone more into the padding side of stuff, where like 2 to 3 alts will occupy a new banner, and then we kind of get maybe like drip fed some other characters. I think that's just kind of how it goes because it kind of bled through a lot of their options really early in, but it's so nice seeing new stuff for any sort of character, I feel. You know, granted, if it's spread out in a relatively good manner, but you know, that's a whole different discussion. Even so, they also tend to consider a lot of other characters that just were never in a playable format, and in my opinion, these are probably some of the most fun things that you get out of this game, especially since they tend to be free and you can just kind of mess with them whenever. I think some of my favorites that have come out of this, even if it's just as of late, could be stuff like Gatekeeper, although he is playable in Warriors, but that's a whole different unlock condition. You have Brigand Boss, and he's just, I mean, kind of a meme pick, but it's funny, and it's really cool seeing these non-playable characters just get in, even if they are just kind of, you know, treated as joke characters. It's really funny seeing stuff like this. Random NPCs such as Fargus, some characters that never really got a lot of treatment in general, or just any attention being brought into the game as, you know, some form of representation. Could be somebody like Altina. You have a lot of variance when it comes to the game, even though they will inevitably dip into the same 10 to 15 characters. I think for the amount of characters that tend to get a lot of attention, you also have a fair bit of stuff that will also get drip fed into the general pool of characters that I think makes the game a lot more interesting and fun to play around with. And on a similar note, it also just kind of introduces people to all sorts of characters, or even for the people who were familiar with a lot of them, I think they do at times get a good second impression through the addition of heroes. I think one of the more prolific examples, at least on my end, would definitely have to be somebody like Valadar. I never really cared about him from Awakening, but when he got into Heroes, he got really cool art, he got a funny PRF, he had good voice lines, he had a lot of stuff going for him. Even if he were just a regular generic Red Tome, I think he would have left a pretty good impression on me nonetheless, because the reintroduction they do in Heroes, in my opinion, tends to help a lot of characters, even the ones that don't tend to have any voice lines at all, so that could easily be a lot of your pre-Teleus, although that's also somewhat limited. Pretty much anything that got to the point where, you know, they're starting to get any sort of voice acting. It's really cool seeing a lot of these old characters from way older titles just getting what is essentially a second chance at pretty much anything related to Heroes or Fire Emblem as a series. They get brand new art, really good voice lines. It's generally a really solid win for a lot of these characters, even if they don't end up being that particularly good or just kind of bad or whatever. I think a lot of the time, I think the best thing that you can easily get out of Heroes, especially when it comes to all these types of characters across the series, is that they just get in. And I know there are a lot of characters that people are still waiting to get in, and I think at least this year, ICE has been pretty good about adding a lot of fan favorite characters, or just a lot of highly demanded ones, into the game. But I think there's so much difference from just grabbing any sort of character from a lot of these old GBA titles, for example, and then throwing them into Heroes with brand new art and brand new voice lines, and it just feels like they have so much more life, and it's great. That's why I love a lot of these characters, even barring whatever they were in their original titles. I think this just adds a whole nother flavor to them, and I like it. Even extending into the art aspect, I absolutely want to mention the OCs, because I think even despite Fire Emblem Heroes writing quirks, quote unquote, that's what I'm going to call it, because I don't want to be any more rude than I could potentially be here, but they really know how to make OCs in my opinion. Maybe not for its characterization, although some tend to be really, really good. I think they just have a really good designer. I probably liked a lot more of these OCs than I care to admit, and it's partially because maybe they have like some one-note personality that I find to be fun tacked onto like a really cool design, and I like it. I think they do a pretty good job on that front for the most part. I'm not going to comment on all of them, but I think more often than not it's been more hits than misses. And this isn't even including the forging bond stuff they do half the time, where they have a bunch of new characters they add into the game. They start interacting with a lot of other characters throughout the series. It's really cute, and the writing half the time tends to be pretty nice for the most part, and it's at a consistent rate too. One of the things that FEH is just pretty good at least when it comes to any sort of Fire Emblem discussion stuff that isn't just waiting for main lines, or I mean tier lists every so often or whatever, is just that the game is constantly getting updated. We get like 3 new banners every month. We get some resplendence. Maybe there's some other game mode stuff going on. It's also kind of low maintenance, which surprisingly also is pretty good for a pick up and play type deal, especially if you don't really want to commit that much time to it every single day, or not even just every day at all. I think there's a lot of stuff that makes the game approachable, even with a lot of its power creep issues going on. That's definitely more of like a back burner end type deal, I feel. But even so, I think there's enough in this game by this point where it's very easy to pick up and play. You can grab pretty much any character you kind of want, obviously barring some stuff because maybe some of them are seasonal or rearmed and limited, and it's kind of complicated here and there. But generally, if you do want a character, and there's a lot of characters in this game by this point, even if a lot of them happen to be alts, I'm sure there's something out there for somebody just to go and grab them. And even despite pretty much every single archetype kind of running the same 1 to 2 sets, you know, for the optimization purposes, we have enough skills in the game to where you could kind of just mess around with pretty much anything of your liking. And I think that's what makes this game really fun for the most part. It's pretty much a celebration of the series, even despite the issues of just representing the same 10 to 20 characters all the time. I think that more so just kind of boils onto the gacha aspect of it. And I'm not necessarily defending it one way or the other, but I think a lot of the reason why the game is even able to function as is, and the reason why a lot of these characters are able to even be represented in some capacity, is because it is a gacha. And I mean, for better or worse, I think there's been a lot more positivity out of it than negativity. Although maybe that's just more of my optimism kind of bleeding into it. Even so, I think for all the issues with power creep and anything to make the game even more difficult to play and giving the same character a bunch of alts every single year, I think the rest that we get out of it is very nice. And you know, there's always been that one burning question that I think a lot of people have been more talking about as of late, given that the game has been running on 7+ years and they've pretty much added most of their super heavy hitters. And that question is the game dying? And to be frank, I don't know. I don't know what's considered good or bad in terms of earnings, and usually we get a month-by-month basis for earnings. It's usually in the millions, which is, at least in my perspective, pretty good, but I don't know what the maintenance is like. I don't know how much it really costs to run. I can't imagine it's a whole lot, but I don't even think that really matters. Even if the game is dying, I think it's better to live like it is the last day of FEH rather than worrying about when it will end, because I think it's fair to say that once the game does inevitably shut down, a lot of us are going to miss it. Even if we do complain about XYZ with the game, or any of the bad choices, or really poor character choices on banners or skills, and whatever the case might be, I think there's just so much that we've gotten out of this, at least personally speaking as a day one player, that it's going to take a while to just adjust without it. I've pretty much opened up this game every single day, even if it's just for like quick dailies and like never touching it again. This has been a pretty core component of a lot of my just daily stuff, which is, I mean, kind of sad to be fair, but at the same time, I mean, I've been with it for a while, and I think a lot of people will probably miss it, even if it's just because they have like a character they've really liked playing around with, or they liked seeing all the new updates or anything of the sort, really. And I can't speak for everyone on that, of course, but again, day one player, it's definitely going to feel different when the game does go away. And for me, even with the game and general interest just, you know, it hasn't really been increasing. It's been, I would imagine, the same pool of people. I like to think of it as more of a community thing at this point, even if it's just from like my Discord server or anybody doing anything on like any sort of social media platform, right? I think there's just a sense of community to it. And I think that's not something I'm really going to see in a lot of other stuff. And maybe that's just tunnel vision because I've just been with this for so long. But at the same time, I don't know if I will end up picking up another gacha just to do whatever, potentially. And I mean, to be frank, I'm not really into gacha. I know I play FEH a lot and the channel is very Fire Emblem hero centric, even though it will dip into like main lines and other stuff from time to time. But I don't play heroes because it's a gacha. I play heroes because I like Fire Emblem. Although I do also like Octopath. I'm kind of on and off about that too. You know, there is a gacha for that. And I mean, I'm probably going to talk about that eventually too, because I have so many opinions on that, but neither here nor there. I'm not a gacha player for the most part. I just like Fire Emblem. And to me, even despite whatever issues this game might have, this feels like another means of Cypher, and I loved Cypher. I think it was really cool seeing all the new characters and all the art and all whatever. But similarly to Cypher, I think once this game ends, it's just gone. We have archives with like data mines and assets. You have stuff such as Kaz Kirigiri doing all that stuff with his own data mining stuff. You have the wikis that's keeping tabs of all the art, all the quotes, whatever the case might be. A lot of anything and everything related to the game. And that's cool. Like, it's really, really awesome seeing this type of stuff. But I think part of that is the reason why I've been so on and off about this history of FEH series that I have going on this channel, because the game will eventually end. And I want to leave some stuff that I think both myself and others can remember the game by, even if it becomes a product of its time. When it's all said and done, I want there to be a lot of things this game can be remembered by, even if it's just the voice actors or the art or anything of the sort, right? There's just so many things that you can contain through asset collection or data mines and like anything else that I think there's always just going to be that really nice time capsule just lying around when you want to just look back on some fun memories. And of course, the game's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. There's always going to be stuff happening that a lot of people don't like or really don't care about, but I think that's perfectly fine to feel that way. There's always going to be some sort of apathy or burnout with the game, and maybe it's just because of newer additions that just kind of makes the game less fun to play with, even if through like the competitive modes. Even if you don't like the competitive modes, maybe you just want to play it casually, you may have to deal with them through like the story mode stuff or the paralogs, and you don't really want to deal with that in a lot of aspects. But I do think there's just going to be things that you can take out of the negative. I don't necessarily think a lot of the time that something is always going to be negative. Obviously, very, very dependent on the situation. But, you know, in the scope of gacha game for Fire Emblem fans, I think in that rut of negative, you might be able to find and dig out a lot of positive things from it. Maybe I'm just on the more happy-go-lucky side of things here, because I like to believe that for every bump and hurdle in the road of this game, there's going to be something really nice that comes after. Or maybe it makes the balance worse, or it just kind of makes the game even more difficult to play. But I think eventually, with how the game is and just how everything kind of changes around a lot of the time, there's always going to be its highs and its lows. And looking out for those highs, I think, is always just going to be a lot more satisfying. I don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with taking a break or calling it quits if it's too much, because in my opinion, there's just a lot to enjoy about Heroes, even outside of the scope of playing the game. And that could literally just be from looking at all the new art, listening to the voice lines, saying whatever they may be represented as. They could be in a silly costume in a seasonal theme, right? There's so much to love about this game that I think even beyond just playing it, there's a lot you could take out of it, even if you just like the main lines and you never want to touch the gacha and you think gacha sucks. And you know what? That's very much valid. I don't particularly care for gacha either, but I mean, I like Fire Emblem, so I'm kind of here. But yeah, I think there's plenty to enjoy about the game, even outside of the game. And I know that may sound really stupid, but I mean, I'm hopeful that it is communicated, because I don't really have many other ways of communicating it. So worst case scenario, I sound like a big old dumbass. And these are definitely things that I've thought of throughout just playing the game. And, you know, do I plan to quit? I don't think I ever will, to be honest. I think it will come to a point where, I mean, I'm gonna have to quit because the game will shut down. But really, the idea is that I started from day one. I want to see it till its last day. I could be the last player in this game. I'm seeing it through to the end. And I may make negative comments here and there or dog on the company for decisions, but at the end of the day, I like the game. And more importantly, I like Fire Emblem. And this part might be a bit more sappy, but, you know, the only reason I have any sort of means of just kind of talking about this stuff is because you guys kind of gave me the platform, right? I don't say it often enough, but damn, you're supporting this big old dummy and you're entertaining me all the time. I couldn't be any more grateful, so thank you for that. And I think at least with Fire Emblem Heroes in particular, it may have taken a lot from us, but I think it gave a lot in return. And for whatever stupid stuff they do, sure, I'll probably get mad or annoyed in the short term, but I think just looking back at everything is just going to be one of those, yeah, that sure was a time and a half type deal. Although I might be a bit more biased because this game kind of built up a lot of my channel, and, you know, I mean, that's, I think, a fair criticism to say, but I am incredibly grateful for what it's done, even before I started the YouTube channel, because I started this back in 2017. Still like it now. I think at my core, I'm still just going to be a Fire Emblem fan, even barring all the gacha mechanics just littered throughout it. This game has given me a fair amount of good and a fair amount of bad, but overall, I don't regret my time with it at all. And hopefully for those who are still here and listening or even keep up with the game, hopefully you feel the same too. It could literally just because you have a favorite you like keeping up with, seeing all the new trailers and updates that, you know, will get a lot of people really excited, especially if they had new characters or given alt to a character people have been wanting, or a resplendent announcement, anything of the sort. Surely something that just keeps you coming back into the game. You gotta let me know what that is. Because, you know, I think at the end of the day, most of us playing this are Fire Emblem fans, and maybe like the 0.01% are gambling addicts, but maybe they're Fire Emblem fans too. Or maybe they just love to gamble and literally nothing else.